Big Questions with the Dead Milkmen.
And this evening's question is, what one thing from your youth would you like to bring back? And what one thing are you glad is gone? So
From your youth.
thing, what?
From your youth, gone from your youth.
Gone, yeah, it's gone from your youth. Like photomats. You don't see them anymore unless you're on acid. And then you see them everywhere. The thing that I would bring back, midnight movies. And I know there are still sort of midnight movies now, but it's people going to see Birdemic, and it's like people with like, I've got a doctorate in medieval folk dancing. The old midnight movies were every freak and reject in your town. The first time I ever saw Pink Flamingos, this is, remember, for you youngsters, this is pre-internet, pre-VHS. I saw Pink Flamingos in a theater packed with people, and that is the way that you should see it. The same way I saw Night of the Living Dead, I saw Freaks that way, I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I actually saw a double feature once of King of Hearts and Harold and Maude, which meant I left that theater after those two films at 4 in the morning. It was great. The theater smelled like a forest fire in Colombia. Fights would break out. Like, that's an interactive evening. I saw a fight break out. During Quadrophenia. I'll never forget it. I'm thinking rockers and mods. During the fight part, it was absolutely amazing. There was also, you would go to, sometimes the films weren't that great, and you would go see like the Woodstock film, and then people would heckle the film, and they were just natural critics. There's a scene where this guy and this girl are discussing their relationship, and this guy just yells, "You're both gross!" And he nailed it. They were horrifying. They were worse than anything out of any movie. Like I say, there's a difference between midnight movies and movies that are shown at midnight. I've never been a fan of Rocky Horror, because I think those people would just go to a midnight showing of Rocky Horror. You couldn't get them to go see like Aguirre, The Wrath of God. So I just saying that was kind of my problem with them. And I always wanted those people out of the theater so that we could see Eraserhead. So that is what I would bring back, real midnight movies. I know the closest we get is when we have the movie night at the cemetery at Laurel Hill, and everybody comes out. It's a great cornucopia of weirdos. That's close, and that gets almost the same feeling. But man, I miss seeing stuff like El Topo and Andy Warhol's Dracula on a double bill with Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, with people who should not be allowed out of the house, let alone out of the house at midnight. So when COVID's over, midnight movies, please return. The thing I'm glad is gone, and again, this is one of the things, I don't think it's gone for good, because I know somewhere there's some hipster banging away on a typewriter, and smoking is smoking. Smoking used to be everywhere. Pregnant women smoked. You would go to the doctor's office, and the doctor would smoke. And when we first started playing, there was still smoking in clubs, which if you sing, and like me, you don't smoke, and even though I'm short enough to have smoked 10 packs a day, I never did, your lungs would be shot afterwards. When we reformed and there was no smoking in clubs, that was a good thing. My main problem with smoking has always been the issue of, after they couldn't sell it to wealthy people anymore because they're, the children of the privileged class were dying, they sold it to my people, the working class. They actually created a cigarette called Dakotas, and they sold them to poor people. And that has always bothered the hell out of me. The reason my wife Vienna quit 8 years ago and quit cold turkey was because she didn't want to give money to the cigarette people anymore. So I know I'm a debauched and sick individual, but I'm kind of glad that we don't see smoking on the scale that we used to. So that is all I've got to say. I yield the rest of my time to Mr. Joe Jack Talcum.
Thank you. I'll take some of your time, I think. I agree with you.
On everything.
On everything. But
all the time.
What I miss from my youth is top 40 radio. I mean, I miss a particular radio station. It was called Wi-Fi 92 here in Philly. I know you're gonna.
Not WFIL?
Not WFIL. I rarely ever listen to that one. But Wi-Fi 92 was my station go-to. In junior high school, I got a Snoopy radio for a gift. It was a transistor. I listened to it at night with one of those, not headphones, but things that you only put in one ear. not even an earbud, but whatever, the thing that would, so only you could hear it. I don't know, it was top 40 format, but it was not exactly like top 40. It was, they would like, their thing was that they were more music, 20 minutes of music nonstop, sort of like that, but then you'd hear 5 minutes of ads.
Yeah, there would be a rock block of pimple cream commercials. There would be like
exactly.
That was
so I listened to it at night, going to bed. I would fall asleep to it. But it's where I first heard Lou Reed, first heard David Bowie. It may have been the first place I've heard the Rolling Stones, come to think of it. They played Stairway to Heaven. That's the only Led Zeppelin song they ever played. But they also played American Pie.
All 7 minutes of it?
It was a very diverse format. I don't know exactly what you'd call it. I think they called it FM Top 40.
Was this like 74, 75?
Yeah, it was in the 70s. Like they were playing Space Oddity when I thought it was a new song, but I later learned that it was like 3 or 4 years old. They were still playing it like it was a regular thing. But that station, I don't know. I really liked it, and believe it or not, right after I moved in with Dave Blood and Manayunk, just a few months after that, it turned into a station called I-92. It was still Wi-Fi, WIFI, and this is those are still their call letters, but they got a WKDU DJ named Mel Toxic, and they got a WXPN DJ, Lee Paris. And it was really hard to believe. They were playing songs. They were playing The Clash. They were playing Elvis Costello, and also Too Much, Billy Idol. They played Rock and Castle way too many times.
Do you know why it was they were allowed to make that format change for a couple weeks?
Well, actually, it lasted almost half a year. Right after we played our first show, I think. Not right after, but shortly after we played our first real show, the Dead Milkmen, they I guess went out of business or something, then became a country station with different call letters.
It's your country cousin, and that means your wife.
But I don't know. I thought it was like a miracle that they even played Black Flag sometimes. And they weren't even on a major label. But I miss that station. I miss that weird, diverse top 40 format. And also, I think if it existed, if they still had a top 40 format radio station today, I couldn't stand listening to it because something bad happened to top 40.
Yeah, I was going to say you could probably do some research, Joe. You might be able to find some old playlists, and then you could set up playlists on Spotify to play those songs like they were on.
Like the 70s one?
Wi-Fi 92 70s style, yeah.
Like you would hear ABBA and then Foghat.
It was so weird. And it was bad. And the DJs would talk over the end of the song. So it was
they were very energetic. They were very high energy DJs. It wasn't like the other end of the FM dial were the sleepy DJs. And as you got into high school, you would learn that Wi-Fi 92 is not cool. You don't tell people you listen to that. You'd say, oh, WIOQ, that's what I listen to. But no, I still listen to Wi-Fi 92 through high school. But that's what I miss. And also, that's probably also what I don't want to, what I'm also glad that's not around.
What, that radio format?
Because it would be horrible if they still had the top 40 radio format now. Because the music, it's just the music. Every now and then I look into what's popular on Spotify or Amazon Music, or I even look up the top Hot 100 on Billboard, and I'm lucky to find 1 or 2 songs I like. And it's almost like genreification ruins things, because there might be 3 or 4 genres, but within those genres, everything is the same.
Yeah, most pop music is made for 11-year-olds. It's always been my problem with poptimism.
Well,
You'll get a good song every
it's-
now and then.
I know, and I was 11 when I started listening to that top 40 station, so maybe that has a lot to do with why I liked it back then. But I still think, and I didn't know this at the time, but looking back, I'm happy that the music was more diverse then. I mean, you could hear the Spinners, which were sort of R&B. It was the first place I heard Daryl Hall and John Oates before they're MTV stars. But you could also hear AC/DC.
This is way before Casey Kasem's top 40, right?
Huh?
This is way before Casey Kasem's top 40 radio.
No, that he had a show back then, I think.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't on Wi-Fi 92. I don't know
Okay.
what station carried it.
When they went like underground music for those couple months, I remember Lee Paris playing The Little Gentleman, and then at the end of it saying, "Oh, Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth, you better look out." It was totally Paris.
I'm curious to know how that ever came about. How did they become high? I know it was based on K-Rock, I think, or what?
They had a space of time before they changed over to, they were planning to change over to the country format, and they had a space of time before they could make that change. And they just needed to fill it with something. And they said, okay, for the next 6 months, we'll just bring these people in. They can do whatever they want. And it was like 6 glorious months.
And it was kind of diverse too, because it wasn't, I mean, it was some punk, it was new wave, it was a pretty wide mixture, and it was fun to listen to that. We listened to it a lot in the Maniac house in the living room. You never knew what they're going to play next, although there are certain songs. They played the Ramones. They still had staple songs that they overplayed. They also played the Police, which wasn't that great. But what can you do?
So that's what you both would bring back, and you're glad it's gone.
Yes.
Same thing. Wow. Okay, Dan, what are your thoughts on this? I think it's Dan is next. Yeah, Dan is next.
My original answer was video stores. And, you know, it actually just occurred to me the other night because Chrissy and I were trying to, like, we were like, hey, let's watch something. And then everything we mentioned, we couldn't find. And I was like, oh, wow, you know. And I was like, and I had such a big movie collection a long time ago, and I've gotten rid of it over the years. And I thought, man, I used to own that movie, but I got rid of it because I was like, oh, the internet. And then I got to thinking my answer is probably a little more broad than that. I think it's like I miss the ability to like accidentally get something cool. Like going into a record store and being like, I've got $5. I didn't find the thing I wanted, but what's this? Let me just pick up this random thing. I feel like with the internet, you know, you've got so many things you can look at, but it's so hard to just find something random. You know what I mean? Like you could find something random from like Poland from the 60s, but I'm thinking like, you know, something. Actually, another thing I got to thinking of was 120 minutes. I know you guys don't like MTV and I don't either, but I'm obviously a different generation, or at least the tail end of your generation. And I would stay up late Sunday nights or VHS record the 120 minutes. It was on at midnight to 2 o'clock. And I discovered a lot of stuff from that. I guess I'm saying variety, like the ability to just, you know, randomly see something and
exposed to something different and weird.
Yeah, like for example, when I was in a record store in high school, I had kind of heard of the Minutemen, but I saw that it was Raymond Pettibone artwork. I was like, let me pick up this 7-inch, and that like changed my life. And I ended up being a huge fan of theirs because it was random. You know, I was just like, doesn't really happen. You don't just randomly like on YouTube or Spotify or whatever you choose. Like, oh, look at this. So yeah, that's originally my thought was video stores. I used to work at video stores, and I'm glad that they're gone now in that way. But the thing I'm glad is gone from youth is similar to what Rodney was saying. Smoking sections. I was like, trying to explain to the kids recently. I was like, yeah, restaurants and like places used to have smoking sections. And they were like, well, how did that work? I'm like, I don't know. The smoke would just go through the whole place and everybody would end up getting smoke in their face anyway.
Smoking sections on airplanes was also crazy.
That
Oh, back there's a smoking section.
There's like a smoking section in the maternity ward. Like,
no, it's funny you said that, Rodney. My mom told me that when she was pregnant with my brother, this is 1970 or 71. The doctor was smoking in the office like that, so it's just what they did.
you used to be able to
And
smoke-
what's I was a smoker for 20 years, and I still am glad that all that stuff is. I didn't like it when it was going on either. It was eating your dinner in a restaurant, smoke everywhere.
There used to be these old ladies that haunted the casinos, and they would sit by 2 slot machines. So they own 2 slot machines. They have a cigarette in each hand, and as they pulled the lever down, they would smoke. And I used to be fascinated by that. Hey, Dan, are you old enough? You're talking about 120 minutes. I'm going to move my camera back some. Are you old enough to remember Night Flight?
Oh, yes.
I've seen clips of it. I'm not at the time. No.
Oh, okay.
I've seen
All
it.
right.
I've seen it in my adult life, though. Yeah.
Before we had 120 minutes, we all watched Night Flight. So
Yeah.
okay, so
I guess
Dan,
it was the same kind of thing, right? It was the same kind of random.
It was very random. It was.
Yeah.
It was they showed the Clash's Rude Boy, and they left the blowjob scene in. I mean, it was so bizarre. It was like, and years later, yeah, I actually got to meet the guy who created it once. I went to a big thing, and that's where I got the poster and all that. But yeah, it was like the precursor of 120 minutes. So all right, so Dan would bring back the randomness of being able to find things, along with and he would be also happy to get rid of smoking. Okay, so that's on board with that. All right, Dean, what is your answer?
Well, let's see. For the first part, I'm going to get a little maybe existential or something. I miss being a kid and waking up on Saturday mornings and not worrying about anything, and just, I've got the whole day to play and not do anything, not responsible for anything. I have some life cereal in a bowl, and I go out the back door, and I just run around the neighborhood for 8 hours until dinner time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I miss those carefree childhood Saturdays where you didn't have a responsibility in the world. Now that I'm an adult, I have all kinds of responsibilities every waking moment of my life. So yeah, that's what I miss. And related to that, what I'm glad is not around in that same neighborhood that I grew up. Does anybody here, Rodney and Joe might remember this. By the time, Dan, you were a kid, this was probably outlawed. We kids back in the day, this is like the late 60s, used to love it when the mosquito fogger truck used to come around, the DDT man. And we used to they would drive through town in the summertime and spray DDT fog throughout the neighborhood. And it was so much fun as a kid to run around and ride our bikes and play in the fog. And that was a thing. And if you look online, I'll provide some links. Lots of people remember this.
Oh God.
I remember low-flying planes doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have a truck that would come through town, and it was a big event. It was like, oh man, the DDT. No, they didn't say DDT. It's like the fogger truck is coming. Let's go. Let's go play and hang out.
Put a little jingle on it.
So I'm pretty glad that doesn't happen anymore. I think they outlawed DDT in like the early '70s. But yeah, that's something that's probably not good for children to hang out and play in anymore.
That's gonna catch up with you.
Got rid of mosquitoes.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a thing, and I'm glad it's not around anymore.
I concur. Yeah. Are we ready for recommendations?
Sure.
Okay, so my first recommendation, and normally when I recommend these bands, everybody's like, I've never heard of them, and a lot of people haven't. This is a band that gets I guess millions of hits on Spotify. Linea Aspera. We've been waiting years and years for the new Linea Aspera album. Linea Aspera LP II, brilliantly named, just dropped recently. It is fantastic. It's just weird because I didn't realize how popular the first one was, and then I was listening to something and they happen to mention it, and they happen to mention, it's got like millions of hits, some of the songs on Spotify. I'm like, that's weird, because normally most of the stuff I like, nobody likes. I heavily recommend it. Sometimes Linea Aspera is wrongly called minimalist and was lumped in with that whole minimalist trend a while back. But actually, Linea Aspera, I consider more dark wave. But you'll like the new album. And if you're not familiar, you'll like the old stuff too. So that is one recommendation. The second is a documentary. I watch a lot of documentaries about the makings of horror films, tons and tons of them. And I've been meaning to recommend this for months. I apologize for just getting to it, folks. It is called Horror Noire, A History of Black Horror, and it is fantastic. I mentioned Night of the Living Dead earlier, so one of the midnight movies I've seen. There's a whole lot in this film about it. There is absolutely a big gap in everybody's horror knowledge. And when you go back now and you watch horror movies from the 80s, after you watch that, particularly if you're white, you begin to notice stuff you never noticed before, like the black friend who is always concerned for like the white protagonist. Like, so the guy comes through with like the axe and slaughters everybody, and then this black person has to run and go, "Are you okay, Susie?" So it's it is a fantastic, and everybody who's awesome is in it. Much love to the Candyman, Tony Todd. It is absolutely freaking fantastic. And if you've never seen the movie Tales from the Hood, then I just have to say, oh yes, the shit. All right, so that's my recommendations.
I am going to recommend a book again. This one is called A Woman of No Importance. Like the book I recommended last week, this is about somebody who is key to helping win World War II. But she was a socialite named from American named Virginia Hall, who ended up becoming an agent for a British spy agency working in France for the French resistance, not only gathering intelligence, but also organizing factions of the French resistance and coordinating sabotage missions and ambushes. And it's really interesting. It's called The Untold Story of the American Spy Who Helped Win World War II, although now it's actually been told because this book is out. And from what I read, it's also going to be a movie eventually. So I found it very exciting. It's a page turner.
Joe loves a good World War II espionage story. Joe,
Well, I certainly do.
Are you familiar with the World War II sort of double agent spy called Garbo? It was really a spy for the French resistance, but pretended to be, they called him Garbo because they thought he was a woman because he would play different parts. He actually wound up getting a pension from both the Nazis because he pretended to be the widow of this Nazi guy killed, and from the Allies for his actual work. But he was so good at convincing people. They had I heavily recommend, since you're fascinated with.
So a double agent. Yeah, there's double agents and triple agents even in this book. And I might have to look to see if Garbo is in here. I just didn't remember.
Recommend it. Dan, do you have a recommendation?
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna recommend. I'm Thinking of Ending Things. It's a movie by.
I've heard that title. Yeah.
Yeah, it's directed by Charlie Kaufman, who I think adapted it from a story or a book. Charlie Kaufman wrote Being John Malkovich and Adaptation, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. He's always done, and recently he did some interesting movies like Anomalisa, which was like a stop motion. This is an interesting movie. It's it definitely requires at least 2 viewings, I think. Yeah, I don't really know how to explain it. It's about a woman and a man and their relationship when he takes her to meet his parents. And it's very surreal at times. Time seems disjointed, and sometimes like the fourth wall is broken or whatever you call it, and like they're in a different Yeah, it's on Netflix, so I recommend that. It's called I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
I am going to recommend a TV series that it's been around for a few years, but I have just only recently become aware of. It's science fiction. It's called The Expanse, and it was originally on the Sci-Fi Channel, and Amazon Prime bought the rights to it. And so if you got Amazon Prime, you can watch the first 4 seasons. There's like 8 or 10 episodes per season. In fact, Amazon is apparently going to produce a 5th season. I became aware of the show by watching a YouTube video by Adam Savage, the Mythbusters guy. He paid a visit to the set and was talking to the art director about the sets, and apparently the show is done or was done on a really shoestring budget, and they've done some amazing things with it. The storyline is pretty interesting. There's like 2 kind of storylines, at least in the first season, which I've watched. One is, so in the future, you've got Earth, run by the UN and countries in the UN. You've got Mars, run by a group of people who are very warlike, and they're dead set on trying to turn Mars into a hospitable place for humans to live. And then you've got the workers out in the asteroid belt called the Belters, and they're like harvesting ice and things for the rest of the world, and that's where all the gritty action takes place. Parallel to this kind of conflict between nations and so forth, there's a mystery involving the daughter of a rich, wealthy guy who kind of disappears, and they're not sure whether she's disappeared or been kidnapped, and maybe she's working for the people who are trying to overthrow the governments who are keeping the Belters down. It's very interesting. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but yeah, I really like it, so I'm going to stick with it. I hope they do eventually are able to produce a 5th season. We'll see how it develops. So it's called The Expanse.
I'll check that out.
Sounds cool.
Well, that's this week's show. Folks, tune in next week. It's another song challenge. You'll get to see the video that finally gets me fired from this band.
Oh, it was, well, we're filming this on Thursday night. It was Dave Blood's birthday yesterday. He would have been 64. Dave, we miss you terribly.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.